Bosses. They're the reason we keep playing, die, learn, and come back stronger. From the cold, sorrowful halls of Boletaria to the open, ruin-strewn plains of the lands between, Soulsborne bosses do more than test your reflexes. They tell stories, compose set pieces, and create moments you can't forget. Today we are ranking 8 Souls games by boss quality. Not sales, not world design, but pure, distilled bosscraft. They are complex things like your body design, but I'm going to make them simple. You're welcome, God. We'll look at design, soundtrack, variety, lore integration, and replay value. And yeah, be careful, I'm a Bloodborne fan. I'm gonna put this game at number 1. I'll explain why each game sits where it does, highlight the fight that swung the scale, and call out what could have been better. And well, if you don't agree with me, I mean, I can't say anything about it. And again, we start with the granddaddy, Demon's Souls. The original, it's the blueprint. Playing it now is a bit like listening to the earliest recordings of a band that later became legendary. Raw, imperfect, and full of ideas. I mean, they made a remake out of this game. So many people don't like that game, and the reason is the same reason some people don't like RE4 remake, which is atmosphere.
Give me a warning next time?
Ashley!
Demon's Souls introduces bosses as a spectacle. The tower, knight's slow, heavy gate, and the tiny opening he gives you on his legs are a beautiful study in risking reward. Old King Allant, especially in the remake, combines tragic storytelling with a aggression that nails a boss arc. By the way, I'm talking about the both bosses. Compared to later entries, some fights feel simpler. AI can be twitchy. Some bosses lean more on pattern recognition and trap placement than layered counterplay, but simplicity occasionally yields moments of pure panic-driven triumph. And the first time you face a giant demon, the adrenaline is real. But the bosses are so easy to kill. I'm not the only one guy that says this. Everyone knows how easy this game is.
I mean everyone.
I don't even know why people said back in the time that this game was hard. What the fuck was wrong with you guys? Like, the same people who played these kind of games, by the way. The original soundtrack is sparse but atmospheric. The remake added weight with richer compositions. The fights often feel cinematic but less symphonically composed than later games. You get a range, knights, demons, beasts, grotesques, and many bosses feel like tragic set pieces rather than characters with arcs. Also, some encounters can feel padded or poorly telegraphed, which knocks the polish down a little. Demon's Souls belongs here because it invented the language. Basically the meme, you know the meme.
I started this company.
But didn't fully refine the vocabulary. It's indispensable history, and it still surprises. But if you want consistent mechanical and musical mastery, later titles trump it, like Trump. About the bosses, we have Phalanx. Probably I'm not saying the thing right, but not mechanically hard but symbolic. It forces players to learn how to use firebombs and AoE. It's less about difficulty and more about teaching preparation. Dragon God, considered one of the worst gimmick bosses by some but notable for scale. Its design foreshadows future cinematic fights. Storm King, an early prototype of the Giant Sky spectacle fight. Demon's Souls also gives you a Storm Ruler mechanic in that game, and Dark Souls 3 later features a different Storm Ruler weapon used prominently in the Yorm encounter. Yeah, we can actually talk about the connections here too in another video, I don't know. Also, Maiden Astray is often considered the true final boss narratively. Her despair-driven surrender adds emotional depth absent from most bosses of that era. A really great boss, you already know what I'm talking about. Number 7. Dark Souls 2. This game is divisive for a reason. It's the one that experimented the most and sadly sometimes messed up, but when it hits hard. The Fume Knight is an absolute laboratory of pressure combat, stagger heavy, punishing, and tremendously satisfying to beat once you learn to respect his space. DLC bosses like Serolon are some of the best duels in the franchise. Single-minded, elegant, and beautifully telegraphed. DS2 introduced more deliberate poison hits than nuance. That meant some bosses felt like they were playing different rules than the player, sometimes to interesting effect, sometimes to frustration. The game loved introducing gimmicks and traps. Some were great, others felt like padding. The soundtrack has great moments, but the overall production occasionally feels less cinematic compared to FromSoftware's other peaks. Still, the arena designed for mini fights, claustrophobic, ruined, or atop a crumbling spire, gives them personality. The pacing is very high. You get massive monsters, weird experimentals, and duels. The problem is consistency. A few fights are forgettable or mechanically suspect. This too is the mad scientist entry. It's uneven, but it produced uniquely intense fights. For players who love variety and brutal trial and error duels, it's a treasure chest. We have memorable fights though. Burnt Ivory King, one of the most cinematic arenas, where NPC allies charge into battle with you. Nashandra, narratively key but underwhelming mechanically. Smelter Demon, infamous difficulty spike. Dark Souls 1, the cultural titan. Why not higher? Because while DS1's bosses have enormous weight and iconic status, some feel more legendary than mechanically perfect. Ruin-strewn and Smoke, the dude that redefined tension. One of the most memorable multi-enemy boss fights ever. Arturias, the DLC, and Manus give a tragic, mythic feel. Gwyn as the final boss is more about emotional payoff than mechanical fireworks. We already talked about why and how evil this man is. Some DS1 bosses rely on atmosphere and puzzle-like mechanics. The combat is aggressive and visceral, but by modern standards, some fights are a touch floaty or inconsistent in hit detection. That said, when a game lands, especially in DLC, it lands beautifully. The OST carries a scene of myth and ceremony that makes many boss rooms feel sacred. The visual set pieces on Orlando's Cathedral, the Abyssal arenas are legendary. Great range, duels, giants, knights, abyssal horrors, and I gotta say, the DLC really ups the game significantly, adding boss encounters that pushed FromSoftware's design forward. Dark Souls 1 sits here because it's mythic and foundational. Some fights show their age in mechanics, but nobody can argue with the emotional power it packs. Bed of Chaos, widely criticized for being a puzzle platform fight, many fans call it the worst boss of the trilogy. I might agree with that because this boss is really pain in the ass. Underrated bosses: Four Kings, a fight in a void with a soft DPS check forcing aggression, and Gwyn's piano track was revolutionary. No booming orchestra, just a somber tone that redefined what a final boss could sound like.
Close your eyes.
Number 5. Lies of P. The jump scare. A newer entry that deserves credit for fresh ideas. It borrows the formula, but it brings a distinct, twisted puppet show flavor. And yes, I know it is not made by FromSoftware. Bosses in Lies of P look like nightmare mechanical puppets and grotesque corrupted humans. The art direction is superb, lots of clockwork limbs, jagged silhouettes, and stage-like arenas that fit the game's carnival nightmare tone. Lies of P experiments with weapons builds and the lying mechanics. Those choices can shape how you approach a fight. A lot of bosses force you to adapt quickly to staggering limb targeting and environmental hazards, which is great. The soundtrack and audio cues back up the theatrical aesthetic. Boss arenas feel like stages in a traveling freak show, and that theatricality adds weight. The game keeps things interesting with a mix of smaller, precise duels and massive, multi-phase set pieces. It doesn't always reach FromSoftware level polish, but it nails identity and fun. Lies of P ranks here because it's inventive and stylish. It's less refined mechanically than the absolute top tier Souls games, but the bosses are unique and memorable in ways that matter. We have King of Puppets. Phase 2 reveal is considered one of the best twists in Souls-like.
Okay, now come on, Blossom, it can't be all that bad.
Like Seja the Complete, praised for being on par with FromSoft duels. We have also Simon, we have Alekino that are really great. Number 4, Bloodborne. Fast, aggressive, and gorgeously grotesque. Bloodborne's bosses are kinetic poetry, high risk, high reward, and frequently terrifying. I love this game.
She's perfect because Rita is, in her own way, as damaged as me.
The emphasis on aggression and regain makes every boss a dance. You get punished hard for passivity and rewarded for well-timed offense. Fights like Lady Maria are duels of a split-second reads and punishing counters. They feel like the game wants you to be bold. Gothic, cosmic, and body horror infused design make the bosses feel maddeningly alive. Orphan of Kaz is often called one of the most heartbreaking and intense boss encounters in modern gaming. As I said before, never even try to fight this guy with headphones on. Bloodborne's music is relentless, dissonant, sometimes choral assault. It amplifies the nightmare tone perfectly. Boss arenas, from the fishing hamlet to the cathedral, are hauntingly staged. That's the thing about Fishing Hamlet and Bloodborne.
See, that's what it is with you people, yeah, I'm saying? My people? What do you mean my people? Black people, what the fuck do you think I'm saying?
From fragile, fast humanoid fights to sprawling cosmic horrors, Bloodborne keeps its best foot forward. The DLC in particular raises the bar, providing some of the medium's most intense duels. Bloodborne thrives on tempo. It's not strictly fair in a comfy sense, it's brutal. But the fights are crafted to create memorable catharsis. That's why it sits at 4. We also had a lot of good bosses. Cleric Beast and Father Gascoigne function as tutorials. One shows monster scale fight, the other teaches parries and aggression. DLC highlights, we have Ludwig, the Holy Blade. Tragic transformation fight goes from beast to knight mid-fight. Orphan of Kaz, Lady Maria, Gehrman, all are masterpiece. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. This one's the outlier, a game about posture and parry timing, not HP whittling. If you ask me, Sekiro rethinks what a boss can be. Sekiro's posture system forces fights into a rhythm: strike, probe, land, a deflection, counter. The combat becomes a duel of reads. Bosses like Ishin, the Sword Saint, loop multiple phases with entirely different tempos. One fight can feel like 3 different duels stacked into one massive test of mastery. Why? The aesthetic is feudal Japan myth fused with grotesque transformations. Thematically, bosses often represent hubris or corrupted legacies, and the combat reflects that through posture-breaking choreography. The music is sparse but impactful. Sekiro gives fewer bosses than some other entries, but each is dense and mechanically rich. The game trades quantity for depth, and that depth delivers long-term replay value for players who savor mastery. Sekiro is about precision and evolution. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but as boss design it's an absolute masterclass, hence the high rank. We have Guardian Ape, phase transition, shock value, we have Ishin Sword Saint, often called the best final boss ever designed, I even say that, and a lot more. Dark Souls 3. This game nails nearly every pillar. It's constantly polished, mechanically refined, audibly impeccable, and emotionally resonant. Slave Knight Gale is practically a love letter to Souls duels. Multi-phase, cinematic, and emotionally cathartic, Soul of Cinder is a thematic final boss that plays through styles from the whole series, a fight that feels like an anthology of players' memories. Pontiff Sullivan, Abyss Watchers, and Lorien Lothric all have standout choreography and arena design. The Nameless King remains one of the most iconic optional fights. Storm, Dragon, and lighting set pieces mastery. Tight, responsive, and varied, DS3 knows how to craft a duel. Clear, telegraphes, rewarding openings, danceable patterns. It also embraces multi-phase bosses without feeling padded. Exceptionally across the board, DS3's OST and boss arenas, cathedral roofs, frozen peaks, blood-stained thrones add cinematic resonance to each fight. The game gives duels, giants, mythic knights, and cosmic abominations, and it spaces them so the player never feels exhausted or unnerved. It doesn't just have a great bosses, this game, it has great boss moments that hit at the right times, with the right music and with the right mechanical hooks. And the crown goes to Elden Ring. If we're ranking by boss quality, Elden Ring, kinda like DS3, nails nearly every pillar. Elden Ring took the lessons of the franchise and refined them. Movement, hit registration, and pacing all improved, and the game filled its roster with fights that feel designed by a team who'd learned decades worth of lessons. A huge, ambitious title that brought Souls boss design into the open world and somehow made it better. Also, I'm not just going to talk about Elden Ring. The game's scope allows FromSoftware to create varied and colossal boss moments while preserving personal, precise duels. Millennia Blade of Mikola, the name alone carries weight, mechanically punishing, multi-phase, and thematically rich. The fight's aggressive elegance and innovation really pushed what a boss can be. Scourge Radon gave us one of the most iconic open world events, a colossal spectacle boss that still required skill and timing. Elden Ring blended Souls style feel with new abilities and summons. The game's mechanics encourage creative approaches, summons, builds, spirit ashes, which changes how bosses are engaged without diluting their mechanical identity. Grand and often perfectly matched to the scale of the encounter, cinematic sequences, and in-world events like the Radon Festival, music made boss fights feel like major world events, not isolated duels. From small intimate duels to sprawling multi-enemy field battles and battlefield spectacle, Elden Ring offers the broadest palette. Elden Ring earns #1 for consistent excellence. We have Radon Festival fight where lore, scale, and mechanics merge into one mythic battle. Malekith, breathtaking lore and mechanics, Morg, Lord of Blood, and we can't talk about Elden Ring bosses without mentioning Shadow of the Earth Tree, the massive 2024 expansion that doubled down on what makes Souls bosses so legendary. This DLC brought some of FromSoftware's most punishing cinematic fights yet. Masame, with his serpenting flames, instantly became one of the most talked about bosses in the franchise, and equal to millennia in spectacle if not in infamy. Wait, not that. Then you've got the Skadju tree avatar. Nightmare fuel evolutions of Earth tree avatars that feel heavier, meaner, and far more aggressive. Promise Consort Radon, it's not just a callback to the base game's Radon festival, it's a full circle finally that ties Elden Ring's mythos into a tragic, apocalyptic crescendo. Mechanically, it mixes Elden Ring's signature spectacle with Sekiro-like aggression, forcing you to parry, dodge, and counter at a relentless pace. Many fans now rank Radon's DLC from among the greatest final bosses in FromSoft history, and many don't like it at all. Shadow of the Earth Tree reminded players that DLC is often where FromSoft saves its most ambitious, hardest, and most beautiful boss design, just like Arturia's Maria and Gale before. Then in 2025, FromSoft surprised us again with Elden Ring Night Rain, the roguelike game spin-off instead of a sprawling open world. Night Rain drops you into a twisted mirror of Limgrave, shifting enemies, and finally a Night Lord boss. You already know the thing, it's a co-op friendly up to 3 players. And to be honest, I was thinking about putting Dark Souls 3 at the number 1, but Elden Ring with its 2 DLCs really beats every Souls game out there in terms of boss quality, and that's why it earns the crown. But remember this ranking is about boss quality alone. If we re-recorded for storytelling, difficulty, or world design, the list might look different, and that's fine. The Souls formula is flexible. It's why these games still spark debates. If you disagree, perfect. Drop your rankings in the comments. And who's your number 1 boss? Was I right to put Elden Ring at number 1 at the top? Tell me your single most memorable fight and why. If you liked this breakdown, hit like and subscribe for more Souls content. Thanks for watching, and as always, may the flames guide your way.